Hello, and welcome to Masters of Divinity. I am the occasional moderator, Father Chuck. JP is unfortunately not able to be with us because he is involved in that farm life, and it is harvest time, and so his schedule has been impacted by the rhythms of the created order. And so I'm here to moderate our discussion. And with me is Father Fun.
Hey, just the two of us.
Just the two of us.
It's another Episcopal takeover.
What if we just started getting like inside baseball Episcopal church stuff and just completely threw everything else out the window?
Hey, I just had I had two fascinating conversations today about what the authority of the bishops were around the Eucharist and whether or not a bishop can inhibit the performance of the Eucharist, except in cases of actual discipline. So like in the current, can the bishop stop me from, obviously the bishop can, in the case of COVID, highly recommend that no Eucharist take place, but if I am a sacramental officer and independent in my sacramentality, can the bishop kind of supersede the authority of the prayer book? Where's the authority line end? And apparently this is something that is going on. These are the conversations that are happening in the Anglo-Catholic circles of our church, and it ended up being kind of a fascinating conversation. I'm also having to think about baptism in the age of COVID, and that's a whole other conversation. But
right, yeah, that's I'm very sensitive to the Eucharistic conversation, and my thing is that we have rubrics and we can't just like throw those out the window. Like, they exist for a reason. These weren't arbitrary things that we created that we can just sort of cast aside. And I will say that I've appreciated that Bishop Fitzpatrick here in Hawaii has tended to take the track of like, I highly recommend that these are the things that you do.
This friend who asked me this question he wanted to know, because there was a growing movement in his diocese, which shall remain nameless, to bring the bishop up on Title IV charges because he had canceled Eucharist, or whatever whatever the word is. He had required that it not be performed instead of doing a high recommendation. I was just like, God, I'm just not interested in bringing people up on Title IV charge. In the Episcopal Church, these are the disciplinary canons. We were joking about getting inside baseball, and here we are already talking about Title IV. So.
Well, and let me just say, inside baseball again, it's an interesting conversation given that they just brought Bishop Love up on Title IV, canonical charges for his refusal to allow same-sex blessings in his diocese. When Resolution B12, that's inside, right? Like, just going at the resolution. That when Resolution B12 was passed at the General Convention, right, that allowed for same-sex blessings in all dioceses, that there was no canonical change saying that like you have to do this, that there was no punishment for like nothing in there, like what happens if you refuse. And so it's interesting that they brought him up on canonical charges for something that there is no real canonical rule for. But all this other stuff that we actually have canonical rules for, we just sort of like turn a blind eye to.
Totally. Yeah, I had that. I don't remember what it was specifically about, but I had that thought experiment a few years ago about like when I swear to uphold the doctrine and faith of the church, or whatever the language is. Like, obviously the canons are the formalized rules, the law, the constitutional law, or whatever of the church, but that the resolutions, like if I break a resolution, have I sworn to uphold the resolutions? It's especially if they haven't changed canons. I don't know. It's a good question.
Well, and then comes that question of when you, like, every year when you renew your ordination vows, does that sort of like cover the new stuff?
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of originalist.
Yeah.
Hi, sweetie. Kids are home from school. Okay, but we're here because this is it's still Music Mayhem, right?
Yeah, I think it's funny that you and I are gonna sort of fight moderate, I think. Because you're going to try to keep me on task, and I'm going to try to want to say a bunch of BS.
I've done a really good job of letting JP be the moderator this time around.
You have.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me, but.
Well, I mean, that's why you're a canon to the ordinary now. Like, that's part of your right. Like,
but it's not
your
like
personality is like.
I'm gonna have much less ability to step in and like lead the conversation. You know, I was thinking about this the other day that, you know, I've been ordained. How long have we been ordained? 8 years? 9 years? 9 years. And I was on the Council of Trustees in our diocese for 6 of those years. And I was always, you know, sitting at the table and part of the conversation. But like as canon of the ordinary, I'm going to be in all those meetings, but I'm going to be like sitting behind the bishop, you know, like literally staffing. Somebody be there, but I'm going to have to keep my mouth shut because I'm only there to serve the bishop. And there's going to be very few instances when I'm actually like running a meeting, and it'll just be an interesting dynamic for me.
Have you read the book The Fly in the Ointment?
Mm-mm.
By Crabtree? It was the book that Peter Eaton had us read when he came in to be our bishop, and it was I found it to be very helpful because it's specifically around that kind of middle management
in the
rubric. But I found it to be a very helpful book. It's funny, he had all of us read it, and I can only think of like a handful of us who actually did. But it was really good. I found it to be really helpful within that transition, and it got me to think a lot about my role as both a chaplain and priest because of there's this one line in it that I'll never forget, and then we can get onto the actual conversation. But there's this one bit in it where it talks about it uses a football coach as an illustration to say that, like, you know, as a football coach, you know all the plays, you know all the stuff that you need to do, but you have to trust your players to do it. It's not helpful for you to like run out on the field,
totally,
and all of that. And so that mentality of knowing when to trust people to do their job, which that goes back to our initial bit here. And in regards to the bishop's responses to COVID, I think is that sense of how much is it giving us the tools that we need to do the work of the church rather than making proclamations and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's going to be an important conversation. I'm going to be very interested to see how that plays out next year at General Convention.
Yeah. Should it happen?
Right. Well, all right. So in putting that aside, we are not here to talk about the church. We are not here to talk about COVID-19. We are not here even to talk about racial injustice that is bubbling to the surface as we record on the anniversary of the Mother Emanuel AME Church tragedy, and the big news also that Aunt Jemima is getting a major rebrand.
I didn't see that.
Oh, you didn't see that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, Quaker Oats is doing away with the Aunt Jemima brand and going to come up with something entirely new. Which I did not know that Aunt Jemima was named after a minstrel song.
A minstrel song? Oh, like from minstrel shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew of the Jemima character kind of conceit, but I didn't know it was a minstrel show song. Yeah.
Yeah. So like deeply racist.
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about that either. Instead, we're here to talk about really important matters, things that are of cosmic significance, and that is we began Music Mayhem with... Give me a second, my brain froze. We began Music Mayhem with Teen Spirit, and now we end it with Teenage Dream.
That's good. That's so good. I'm proud of you. I didn't even get on that.
It came to me in the bathroom this morning. I want to know. Okay, so this was the Wheel of Mayhem choice, right? We all put our various albums onto the Wheel of Mayhem, and
the parameters of which was right one that you
one good, one bad. However we interpreted that.
However you interpret that. Okay.
And so the Wheel of Mayhem was spun, and fate decided. The lots were cast, and they fell upon Saint Matthias. No, they fell upon Teenage Dream.
Katy Perry Garments. Yep.
So I need to know, Patrick, because I honestly I thought this was a Matt choice. I did not realize this was a you choice, and I thought, oh my God, Matt again. I want to know, why was this I'm ostensibly your bad album choice? I mean, I can tell you why I think it's bad, but
I picked. I'm sure we will get there. I picked Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon as my good album because I just love it, and recently re-listened to it, with my new Apple, AirPod Pro set noise canceling, so like I could only hear Dark Side of the Moon, and it was awesome. So I want to talk about that. But I was having trouble coming up with like a bad album, and so I took it more as like what would be something that might annoy people and inspire good conversation, And I think I may have succeeded because only half of the Music Mayhem participants showed up for the meeting today, so maybe there's a reason there. Oh, it's growing season. Okay, sure. No, I think I was thinking along the lines of like, what's some earwormy stuff, and like, I think, I don't know. I think pop music is always like an interesting thing to think about and unpack, and I kind of had in my mind that Teenage Dream was about 10 years old, and I thought, we're kind of in a different place, and like have musical pop taste changed, and let's go forward. But the other thing I thought about was, you guys talked about Thriller last week, and Katy Perry this album is wildly successful, and I recall, I went to a Katy Perry concert back in 2011. We went for our second anniversary. We saw her at the Sprint Center in Kansas City, and I think it was the day that whatever the fifth single from the album got to number one on the charts, and that I guess I could look it up real quick, but that I remember them talking about it at the concert, or her saying something at the concert. But the Teenage Dream is only the second album in history to ever have 5 number one hits on the pop charts, and the other one being Bad by Michael Jackson. So I think that like Michael Jackson was in my brain, and I just think like no matter what you think about the album, like that says something about its stickiness,
right.
and that's something that is interesting, would be interesting to talk about. I don't know.
Okay. So following the format we've had in previous episodes, do you have any initial thoughts? Yeah, so I can't say I've ever actually listened to the whole album all the way through, but when I did listen to it all the way through, my first thought was, well, I kind of had two thoughts at the same time. One of them was my God, the bass drum is just incessant in this thing, just like boom, 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 which I guess is like dance beat stuff. So I had that thought. But then the other thing I had as I was listening to it, and I had this feeling that I was going to be on the defensive side of whatever conversation was being had, and so I kept trying to find like some kind of redeeming value to anything that I was hearing. And the one thing that I just kept, every time I would listen to a lyric, I just kept thinking to myself, like, there is no nuance. Like, there is there's no subtlety. It is just like, not only is the drum beat in your face the whole time, but like the lyrically and thematically, it's just in your face the whole time. And even I can't remember what there's one song where it takes a break, but like I just kept thinking to myself, man. And so then I started spinning out and thinking, like, is that what pop music is? And like I want to really like pop music, and I think I do like a lot of pop music, but is that does I was trying to think about, has there been like complex, like when we were talking about Guster, it's like there's not a single Guster song that has lyrics that are this popcorny, like there's always some kind of like
but there's plenty of metaphor in this, but it's just like really heavy-handed and obvious metaphor. You know?
I think a good comparison to that, what you're talking about, is Lady Gaga, who is decidedly a pop musician, but lyrically is playful, and there's poetry, and like even in those instances where she's being sort of overt, like in I can't remember what song it is, where she talks about take a ride on the disco stick or whatever. Like even that line, which is probably the meaning is very obvious, is still kind of like there's a playfulness to that.
It's subversive because she's a woman, and
right.
There's
another pop musician but of course we're talking now 10 years later, pop music is very different, but like a contemporary pop musician who I think does this really masterful artistry with pop music is Maggie Rogers. Her single Alaska. So she studied music, I think at NYU, as part of like their pop music program, or is there some kind of music program, and she decided to use like pop music as her artistic expression, and so her thesis or whatever was ended up being, I think, the song Alaska, which is her first single, and she performed that for Pharrell Williams, and he was like, this is perfection. And so she's got some really great lyrical work and themes, and there's like some real emotion and depth to what she's doing, but it's like also like bright, and you can kind of like dance to it or whatever. So I think it does exist. I just don't think Katy Perry is it. I think that, well, I could get into my thoughts, so I don't want to overstep you. So
I just had those two thoughts, just like incessant is, I think, the word.
Okay.
And I think I was surprised for someone who is as popular as she was and is, and apparently she is on a tour that's COVID canceled now. She's still putting out stuff, but she's just not a good singer, which I was a little surprised by. I think I expected her to be a little bit better of a singer. So those are three things.
Yeah, my feeling after listening to it. So I got so much to say. I don't know if this is. I don't know if this is going to come across as, I'm trying not to be misogynistic at all, but like there's this definite feeling to me of listening to that, like being hot gets you really far in life, because like listening to her music, all I can think is that there were people that were just like, oh yeah, she's hot, people will watch videos, so like here's a career. It doesn't come across as like she has something to say.
Yeah.
But let me couch this also by saying that I was actually kind of looking forward to listening to this, because I've heard Firework a million times, and I'm like, like there's like a positive vibe to that song, like, and it's not bad, and I was like kind of excited to listen to it, and then you shared the information with us that she like sexually assaulted one of her background dancers in a video. Yeah. And that immediately peppered my entire feeling about listening to this, because now I'm like, I'm listening to the music of a dirtbag, which is kind of interesting coming after Michael Jackson, where I sort of we sort of danced around that topic a little bit. And we had started broaching on the conversation whether or not you can appreciate something in spite of like the person's like awfulness or whatever. And so now I'm kind of like, I'm a hypocrite maybe, but I guess it's like just immediately, like the day before I started listening to it, you shared that news, and so I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So my initial thoughts really are that it is amazingly shallow. You said incessant and like just up front, and I think that's it. It's like, since you use the word shallow, it just makes me go to like a surfing place. I'm just thinking like Shore Pound. It's just like, it's just right there, pounding without anything underneath it. It's just flat, like there. And like lyrically, like I wanted to like things, but then I'm listening to the lyrics and I'm like, if there's no artistry here, there's no poetry. It's just there are words being sung. And
so, yeah.
And I get that. and I was thinking about it this morning in the shower before I came in. I was like thinking about how the counter argument that I could hear someone say to that is, well, it's pop music. What do you expect? And I came to this really weird place of comparing it to like Godzilla. So Godzilla King of the Monsters came out a couple years ago. People criticized it for the human actors not being good, and a bunch of Godzilla fans were being like, well, you don't go to a Godzilla movie for the human actors, you go for the monster action. And that only happened in Godzilla King of the Monsters because so many people criticized the lack of Godzilla's appearance in the 2014 Godzilla movie, which was like all about human actors and like very little about Godzilla. And so I'm like thinking like, well, what do you people want, right? Like you're saying like there's not enough Godzilla, but now you want nothing but Godzilla. And there's this attitude of like, you can't have it both ways. So like this idea of like, oh, it's pop music. What do you expect? It's not, it's not art, but it is. It is art, and it should be saying something. And especially, I think there's an obligation where clearly you are marketing this to teenagers or preteen girls. What are you saying with this? And, so listening to it with that in mind, I'm like, man, I'm very bothered by a lot of it. And there's also no depth. And so those are my initial thoughts.
Well, so I don't think I have a problem with it I don't care as much that it's being marketed to preteen girls or whatever. I want to stay away from that, except to say that I think that the messages in it are leaning toward trying to do empowerment, and so I want to like honor that. I think, but as you were talking, one of the things I kept thinking to myself was, what does it say that 5 of these songs became #1 pop hits? Because what pop music does is it holds a mirror up to us. Mm-hmm. And we should be able to learn something from what is popular and where culture is, or where we are as society or something like that. I don't know. I don't want to, maybe I don't need to make it deeper than it is, but these are earworms, right? Like it's fun. It actually, even though it was incessant to me, it was fun to listen. It was fun to listen to, and not even fun to hate. I was gonna say fun to hate, but like the songs are catchy, and I find myself humming them, and I think that it's okay for it to this. And I'm trying not to say like it's pop music, get over yourself, but I do want to say like, it's pop music, and and so it does what it accomplishes to do, is to be like played in clubs and like have you hum along, and like it does that, and they're trying to like mine a deeper message from it. I don't think I have as much time for that as you do.
Maybe. Well, let me say this. So just by way of biography, I did like no biographical reading on her, other than I focused a little bit on her relationship with Russell Brand, which then led me to like read about Get Him to the Greek, which is a funny movie. But and I actually wondered if the character of Susie Q in that movie was based on her, but was not apparently. But the thing about Katy Perry that for me is always going to be in the background is that she grew up as an evangelical Christian, was an evangelical Christian musician, released records as Katie Hudson. And then doesn't really get anywhere with that career, and then suddenly comes out the gate with "I Kissed a Girl and I Liked It," and
that's right. Yeah,
there's this thing to me. So this is where my perspective comes in as a former evangelical myself, and I wish JP or Matt were here to talk about this too, because I think we would all sympathize with this sense that there's a thing that happens when you leave evangelical Christianity. When you get away from that bubble, because evangelical Christianity is different than other forms of Christianity in that you're in a bubble, right? You're largely encouraged to listen to Christian music, to frequent Christian businesses, to read Christian books, to watch Christian movies. Like it's this whole like alternative world to the so-called real world. And what happens when you leave that and you get away from it, there's this tendency to react really strongly And you see this, and I see this with a lot of Christian musicians. Like I've seen it with Derek Webb, I've seen it with David Bazan of Pedro the Lion, that when they leave that world and then they kind of reject it, they swing to this other extreme of like being like wild a little bit, or just like really pissed off at it, and kind of like aggressive, going in an aggressive opposite direction. And even like focusing a lot of the attention on like some person they've fallen in love with, and sort of attributing sort of spiritual language and truth to that, as though it liberates them from this oppressive thing they've come from. And I see a lot of that underneath her music. There's an element of like a try hard piece that she's like trying really hard to be like, I'm not Katie Hudson. I'm not the evangelical Christian girl that everyone, that people have now become aware of, because, they didn't know who she was when Kiss a Girl came out, but then that started to kind of come around a little bit more, that, she had this previous career. And so there seems to be this real like pushback to that identity. That's the way I see a lot of the music, just because I've seen it play out with other evangelical artists. But then there's also this other thing that happens where it is inescapable. It will always be a part of your identity. And so there are elements of it that are always going to be there. Tori Amos, who I've been listening to a little bit during Music Mayhem, Tori Amos was raised by a Methodist minister. And even though she kind of rejected that, elements of her Christian upbringing find their way into her music. David Bazan, who left evangelical Christianity, declared himself sort of like a non-theistic person, still sings and talks about God in his music. And from a fairly rich place once he's sort of been liberated from that. And so like in this album, there is Who Am I Living For? Which that song sounds like there's elements of God in it, that it sounds like adjacent to like a Christian song. And so there's this wholly complicated thing, I think, with it. I will say that I think that the second half of the album is way better than the first half. I think she's actually saying interesting things in the later songs. I think the first songs are just pop music drivel. Like I just don't like them. But we can get into it. So do we want to go song by song on this one, since this album is shorter than Wanna Be Starting Something?
Sure. Yeah, I was
amazed at how short this was.
Yeah. It went quick. It was like one drive from Manhattan to Topeka for me.
Yeah, like once Not Like the Movies ended, I was like, oh, it's done.
Yeah,
like it just ended. All right, I have notes.
I did not take notes. Yeah,
I wrote little notes. I already kind of, with Teenage Dream, I wrote, there's this whole post-evangelical thing where someone puts their faith in some person they've fallen in love with. This song seems to reflect that. So I already mentioned that note. So
yeah. So is it appropriate to do some armchair psychology as well, and ask you if you, I hear you say that and criticizing it, and I'm thinking to myself, methinks thou dost protest too much.
I mean, maybe. I just remember myself at her age when she recorded this, and like the same things were going through my life and going.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Okay. As long as you're aware of it, I guess. And I just want to make sure that our listeners understand that this is not a gendered thing. That this broad blanket statement you're making about what happens in post-evangelicalism is something that you also have experience with.
Yeah, and I think, and I guess the thing that gets me is like, I actually want more. I want her to be more examine that more. Like I really want her to be more like engaging with that part of her life, rather than just sort of papering it over. And that's why I think the later songs are way more interesting than the earlier songs in the album. But like Teenage Dream, I mean, I don't know. It's a good pop song, I guess, but it's the same 5 words repeated like a million times.
Yeah. The thing that I don't like about Teenage Dream, God, I told myself I was going to come in and like defend this. I think that
you did pick it as a bad album, Patrick.
Yeah. Well, I don't. I think the thing that, like, when we talked about like it being marketed to teenagers or to pre-teenagers, I think the thing I don't care about the sexiness of it or the sex of it. I'm glad that there's like an element of empowerment or anything, but I also I don't like the facilness of what love is supposed to be, and I think you see that in basically everything. Is that there's this immature understanding of what love is, and that just reinforces stereotypes, it reinforces cultural messages about what you're looking for, and that it turns out, kids, that it's so much better to not be in the teenage idealistic mode of what love is. That's the problem I have with Teenage Dream. About the song.
Yeah, I kind of see. This is where your comment there reminded me of another thing I thought of this morning that I should have written it down in regard to this. But this feels like sort of like teen exploitation. Like it's
because she's how old? Like 20 something.
Yeah, I mean it's written by guys in their 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of the songs, every song has like 5 or 6 writers on it. And so you're seeing, mostly adult men trying to write songs about teenage emotion. And at what point is there an obligation to at what point is it even real, for that matter? Because I can get on when we get to the one that got away, as I'm going to get into where I'm concerned about some marketing stuff that's going on with this. The way that it's sort of treating teenagers as a marketing thing. But I forgot what I was going to go with that. But it just felt, but oh yeah, compare it to, say, Blink-182's Enema of the State, which is an album written by super immature dudes. That I think does a really good job of they're in their mid-20s, and they're sort of reflecting a quarter life crisis a bit if you listen to that album, revisiting their high school teenage years as sort of glory days a bit. And it has there's this element to that album that feels like it really does capture the emotions that teenagers experience, but in a way where it's not like attempting to be in the mind of a teenager. It is revisiting it. Like Going Away to College, I think, is a perfect song in terms of that, about the fears of what it's like to leave home and growing up and all that kind of stuff. Whereas this seems like you said, that this idea of love is like so surface level and so like, I don't know. And like, it sort of captures that kind of Romeo and Juliet element of, I'm 14 and this person is like my entire identity.
Yeah. Yeah. But also, like, is it possible that we're not getting it?
That's also possible.
Is it meant to be satire? I don't know.
That's actually a really good point.
Like, I don't know. Maybe
that's actually really, now I may have to listen to it again from the perspective of possible satire. All right. Anything else on Teenage Dream?
No.
Okay, TGIF. All I wrote was post-Christian tryhard.
Yeah, I think that my favorite TGIF type song is also another Dr. Luke joint, TikTok by Kesha. It's the same kind of idea of like, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do it again, and I'm gonna do it again, and I'm just gonna keep doing it.
But you know what? TikTok sounds like Kesha actually did it. I'm not convinced that Katy Perry actually did anything in this song. This sounds like a teenager's idea of like what like an early 20s wild night sounds like.
Yeah.
And I also was listening to it. I'm thinking like, man, what a different world 2009 was, because like now everyone's like Friday night, like I just want to watch Netflix and stay home. Like I don't want to spend a bunch of money on drinks and debauchery.
Do 20-somethings still think that, or are you just saying like 30-somethings are that?
No. Like that's what I mean, based off of the memes that I see online.
Yeah.
And based off of what teenagers told me when I was at St. Andrew's School, that the general attitude is like they would rather like be at home and watch Netflix than like go out and tear it up.
Well, it's also because we're living through, the era of TV where everything is just so good. There's just so much to watch, right?
Right. Yeah. And the other thing I'm trying to the chronology of that song is what's like bugging me. Like, like she opens up by saying that she's like, like, what did I do last night? But then she's like, last Friday night. Like, wait, like you're talking about what happened a week ago? Or like, it's like, are you implying that the hangover was so severe you've slept for multiple days?
Hey, that's possible.
But then
she
like,
says this Friday
we'll do it again.
But that's forward looking. It could be a Saturday. It could be a Saturday.
But would you wake up on a Saturday and say last Friday night?
No, but maybe I need those. I need the syllables to make the lyric work.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm going to get into a lot of that pedantic nonsense.
One of the things that I wondered about was I was thinking about the timing of. Do you remember that Friday song?
Yeah, Rebecca Black.
Rebecca Black. That was 2000. That was like right around this, right? Just before it, maybe. And so
after. It was after.
Was it after?
Yeah, because that was like a big thing. That was like a big thing when I was at Holy Trinity. I remember because like a lot of the youth were making jokes about that, and that was like 2011, 2012. Yeah. So I don't know. It's a one of those songs about like a wild party.
Perry revealed, "There's nothing better than an impromptu dance party with my friends. My track, Last Friday Night, TGIF, is a song about debauchery because I had one of those nights in Santa Barbara. We went out to this place called Wildcat and got crazy," Perry admitted. "We had a couple of beers and danced until we died, then brought the party back to the hotel room." She added, "Most of that song is actual truth, apart from the menage a trois, unfortunately. But yes, streaking in the park, that's what we did, so we had to write a song about it the next day!" Exclamation point.
I still don't believe she did it. That sounds like PR, like we're going to drum up some notoriety. We're creating an image for you. We need you to be like this. But who knows? Believe women, right? So she had a fun, wild night. All right. Anything else on?
No, let's go forward. California Girls. What'd you write down?
Girls.
Right.
All right. This is where I actually get a little longer. Okay, so nothing about this song is distinctly California, other than the constant reminders. How is this a, quote, response to Empire State of Mind, end quote? That song has deep references to the city. This one could literally take place anywhere.
Yeah, but you can't wear Daisy Dukes and bikinis on top everywhere. In
Florida, you can. Which to me, that's a more Florida look, by the way. Like that's Daytona. When I hear Daisy Dukes with a bikini on top in the back of a Jeep, I think of Daytona Beach.
Yeah.
And notice that all they say is like the Gold Coast is the best, and then it's like all about like girls from California, and like. What? Okay, fine. You want to do a song about California girls, and you sort of want to play off of the Beach Boys thing, right? Which, even though Brian Wilson's trying to do something way more interesting than what this song is trying to do, that's fine. By the way, that's going to be a recurring theme in my complaints about this. Is that her in her interviews and in her music attempt to reference far better musicians in a way that is not meaningful. But the fact that she comes out and says, like in the stuff I read, that this was meant to be a response to Empire State of Mind by Jay-Z and Alicia Keys, which Empire State of Mind is about Jay-Z's life growing up in New York. And he is like, it's basically a song of him driving through New York or riding through New York and reminiscing. I mean, at one point he points out like where his stash spot was, right? And so that's like, it's a song about New York City.
It's also deeply. It's also. This is also why I'm liking the satire thing more and more, because both because it's Alicia Keys and because of Jay-Z, it's very earnest, and it also feels like a post 9/11 tribute song, even though it was 8 years later. Like there's a love and a respect for New York, and in its melody and in its lyrics, whereas this is just like, if it is an answer song, it is completely different, right? It's entirely just about the pop and the surface again.
Yeah, but I was also thinking about what part of California are we talking about here? Because it's a huge, diverse state. Like, you're not talking about the Valley. You're not talking about San Francisco. You're not talking about Oakland.
Southern California. Yeah.
So that's that. All right, Firework.
I like Firework.
I used to like Firework. I actually really did until I listened to it.
Yeah.
So I wrote, opens with an American Beauty reference, but then uses a flash in the pan metaphor as a way to ascribe profundity and beauty. Show them what you're worth. So, like a thing that explodes and gets a second of attention then completely fades away. The moon is at least reliable. And then I wrote in all caps, how the hell is this related to On the Road? She claimed that this was inspired by Jack Kerouac's On the Road. How?
Self-discovery, empowerment. I don't know. That's
okay. So I've listened to this song every 4th of July because it plays at every fireworks show at 4th of July.
No, does it?
And and of course I've seen the interview, which uses it to like hilarious effect.
I can't remember that scene, but go ahead. Yeah.
But like this whole idea of like, okay, like, oh, it's empowerment. Like it sounds like an empowering song, and that's great. And I'm, even like the chorus, baby, you're a firework. Oh, I get it. Like, it's big, it's beautiful. Everybody pays attention to it, right? And I would be on board with that if she didn't open it with the American Beauty reference about, do you feel like a plastic bag blowing in the wind, which is such an iconic image from the movie American Beauty, and it's such a perfect image. But it's such a perfect image of like capturing what like a teenage boy who's into art thinks is deep and profound. And it's one of those things like it ages with you. And so this actually may yield credence to your whole thing that this is actually satire. But like now that you've used that reference, which is basically an utterly empty image. Now I'm thinking of the firework as this isn't really all that empowering. Basically, you're like, be really awesome for a second.
Yeah, burn out quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting about that, though. Firework was the first song played after Hillary Clinton accepted the Democratic presidential nomination at the 2016 Democratic National Convention.
Anything else on Firework? Or we just leave it at that?
No. Let's go.
All right.
Peacock. No. Peacock. Oh my God. I think this is where I first had the like no nuance.
Yeah.
Like, you think you're being clever, but you really are not.
What is it? Someone was it New Yorker or Spin? One of them I read, there was a review where it said that like, oh, she actually like used the word to mean the thing.
Right.
Like there is no double entendre.
I mean, it is. But yeah, it is. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Peacock was panned by music critics and musically was compared to the 1980s hit Mickey. Oh, Mickey, you're so fine, you blow my mind. And Gwen Stefani's Holla Back Girl in 2005.
I wrote, song is super uncomfortable after learning what she did to that model. So for those listeners who don't know, the model in the Teenage Dream video, he said that he was invited to a roller skating party where she was there, and he came up to say hi, and she pulled his pants down and showed his penis off to everyone and was like
gathered everybody around.
Yeah, it's like, look at it. And so now that you've got this song that's all about showing that off, like, it's super uncomfortable. I also wrote, this thing is basically sexual assault, the song. And then I wrote, flip the genders and you'll see what I mean. I mean, listen to like, like, show it to me. I want to see it. Come on. Like, geez. Settle down.
Holy cow. When asked about Peacock, Perry stated, I'm hoping it will be a gay pride anthem. Peacocks
What?
represent a lot of individuality. It's not just like, I want to see your bulge. And then she went on to clarify, it does have the word cock in it, but art is also in fart. It's all in how you look at it.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, man.
Oh, jeez. And the funny thing is that Firework is the one that kind of became a queer anthem.
What I love is I love the headline. The headline from the Entertainment Weekly article is Katy Perry debuts new song Peacock. I'm hoping it will be a gay pride anthem. I feel like anytime you release something, hoping that a demographic will latch onto it and make it an anthem,
right?
You're probably barking up the wrong tree.
Oh yeah.
Especially if it's a demographic that you are not of.
Right.
Moving on.
Circle the Drain. I wrote, ooh, so edgy. She talks about vague addiction and uses the F word. She really thinks she's being deep here.
Yeah, this is the one that has like a gothic, kind of industrial kind of a tone to it.
Which I was like, at first I was like, oh, is this about like, is this when her and Russell Brand were breaking up? Because like that could be actually interesting if this is a song about his struggles. But nope, they had started dating like just before this started. Like so, like she had written this like sort of concurrently with all of that.
Oh my gosh, her quotes are just
they're amazing.
I want to get all of these quotes on T-shirts. Well,
what do you got? What do you got?
Billboard. Okay, Entertainment Weekly writer Leah Greenblatt stated that Perry's lyrical talent is not her strength, adding, neither, in fact, is rhyming forte with foreplay, as she does painfully in the druggy boyfriend takedown, Circle the Drain. Billboard journalist Monica Herrera found the song to have been inspired by Pat Benatar's material, while Perry herself said, it's kind of like my You Oughta Know Alanis Morissette moment.
No. Oh no.
No, you can't compare yourself to Alanis Morissette.
Yeah, I feel like this was we had a quote from Justin Timberlake when we did In Sync's whichever one it was that we did.
No Strings,
No Strings. And I remember we laughed at the fact that it revealed how Justin Timberlake was young and just unaware of what he was talking about, and because he compared himself to some musician where everybody was like, dude, no, and since Justin Timberlake has become a powerhouse, but
exactly, it's like, but it kind of got fulfilled, right?
Yeah. That's, oh my gosh, this is my You Oughta Know. All right, the one that got away. That's a good segue, because my first words when I wrote the note was a Radiohead reference, because she opens about like listening to Radiohead, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I said, so she's guilty of making allusions to much better music. This one comes across as the musical equivalent of wearing band T-shirts from Hot Topic or Spencer Gifts. If you're going to reference Johnny Cash or Radiohead, that needs to mean something more than just a name drop, so that teens think you're more musically broad than you actually are. Yeah,
that one was really disorienting to me. The Johnny Cash one was, that didn't hit me as much, but the Radiohead one, I was like, this song, like, it doesn't, your music doesn't have to sound like the band you referenced, I guess, but does it have to be the like polar opposite?
Yeah, and like in the sense that it's to me it's like oh, I've seen Radiohead shirts at the mall, so I know that they're an important band, right?
Yeah, it's like I walked by Spencer's and saw the T-shirt wall.
Yeah, and so it's like I know they're important, but I don't really know who they are. I don't know. I mean, if the result of this song is that some teenager like was like, oh, okay, computer, I'll check that out, and then suddenly becomes like really into Radiohead, then cool, good job, Katie. But it's just, now I will say I wondered about this song a little bit. There's a Jewel has a song off of her first album. Give me a second. It was one of the 3 singles off of her first album. Someone Like You is Adele. Anyway, I can't remember which song it was, but basically she describes Jewel describes this this guy she was with, who's like all artsy and into Mozart and like, and I remember after I listened to it a couple years ago, I messaged JP. I was like, oh my gosh, like I think I've just listened to a song that like sounds like it was written by someone who dated me when I was in college. Like I'm the most insufferable person. Like that's what it sounded like. And so this song that sort of references and is meant to make the love interest of the song sound like this pretentious person. I'm almost wondering if this song might be trying to do something similar to that it's the one that got away, but like when you're a teenager you think that this person who listens to all these people is like really something deep, in which case, like again, if your satire comment is true about this, then this song is actually not bad. But
it's interesting. Still, like I only take this one to be like super earnest and in that way problematic, because it's that same kind of thing. It's that same issue I had with the Teenage Dream thing, right? Like you're pining for this thing. Like it mostly just is depressing, you know? And like I just wanna give her a hug, you know? But if this is real and not satire, and she is actually looking back and thinking about somebody who got away, like move on with your life, man.
Yeah. E.T.
Yeah, E.T.
I wrote nothing.
Okay, which is probably more of an indictment. I think it's hard to put a 6-syllable word into your song, and I think it kind of works. Extraterrestrial. But then again, it's about like, I don't know.
Apparently, I read along the way last night that I didn't see the actual quote, but that I did see that apparently it's like meant to be a song about falling in love with a foreigner, which is yikes.
That's funny that you say that, because I was right there. It was at the tip of my tongue when I was thinking like this fetishizing of otherness. You're touched so foreign, it's supernatural, and it's interesting thinking about the Christian upbringing. Like supernatural and extraterrestrial are not the same thing colloquially. Right. So maybe she's Mormon, actually.
Scientologist.
Yeah, or Scientologist. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. I don't hate any of these things, but they do.
Is it about Russell Brand because he's so different? Well, but this is now this is an interesting conversation a little bit, because there is this element when you first leave the evangelical world and you experience being with someone, who doesn't fit into that world. There is definitely this sense of like you are in a foreign and otherworldly thing, and it is enticing. And so, like I said, I really want to know how much of that is informing any of this. Of course, she didn't write most of these songs by herself, so who knows? But it is an interest. But she did choose the songs and the themes and stuff. So I am. It is an intriguing subtext. So yeah. Who am I living for? I wrote, maybe the most interesting song on here, as it could be seen as her grappling with her faith a bit, almost akin to David Bazan at times. But it's also so generic that it's hard to say that it's substantive.
Yeah, I don't recall this one. It's like forgettable to me.
Okay, she makes references to Esther, but like that there's the overall theme of the song is sort of like, it's kind of, there's almost an element similar to get back to DC Talk for a moment. There's a song off DC Talk's Jesus Freak album called What If I Stumble, and it's basically the band confronting the fame and what fame means for them as Christians. And so the question is like, how much pressure is put on them as Christians that are famous? What if they stumble? It opens with a Brendan Manning, a recording of him talking, saying that The greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who follow Jesus with their lips but then live lives that are very different. And he said this is something that an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. And so there's a similar theme to Who Am I Living For, where it's like I'm famous, like I'm in front, like there's this rising fire inside of me. There's all this stuff happening inside of me. There's a lot on this line, but then this question of who am I living for? And it does make this suggestion: is it for something bigger than herself, or And so I mean, again, but it's worded in such a way that it's not. It's almost like I almost wanted to believe that maybe she tried to make it a more overt song about these kinds of questions, but then some of the other pop songwriters like wanted to water it down more, saying that like people won't listen to it if it's too thematic this way.
Yeah.
But it's interesting.
Maybe, but it's also like it's on the B side or whatever. It's not like
right.
Get to the pop charts. Okay.
Pearl,
what do you get for Pearl?
I got nothing for Pearl.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with this one. I'm revisiting the lyrics a little bit, and it feels like an empowerment song that's critical of the way that the patriarchy treats women.
Yeah.
Which in that way I think it's good. Like, as much of that can be out there is good. I don't remember it musically at all. Like it just in one ear, not the other.
Yeah, I do remember that she does this thing where she's like sort of talking in the singing in the third person about this woman who used to be a pearl and now she's an empty shell. Which that metaphor doesn't work, by the way.
She could be a Statue of Liberty. She could be a Joan of Arc. But
yeah, what does that mean?
He's scared of the light that's inside of her, so he keeps her in the dark.
Yeah, there's a lot of references to light inside coming out in this album. So I'm gonna bring this up in the next song too. So I had to look and see because I know that like the big hit maker of the pop songs in the 90s, particularly Britney Spears' "Hit Me Baby One More Time," was a Swedish dude,
right?
And he was trying to create slang, English American slang, with "Hit Me Baby One More Time," like because that song of course has been criticized for sounding like it's about abuse. But what he was trying to say was like, hit me up, like on the phone, call me.
Yeah.
But it was
successful. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was like a Swedish guy.
Yeah.
But it was like a Swedish guy's attempt at American slang. So it has this like it's close enough, but not really, right? Mm-hmm. And I was wondering how much of that was in. I tried to look and see if some of the songwriters were a part of that same Swedish music hit-making circle, because some of the language, some of the metaphors just don't really work. Like they're close but not enough. Like again, she was a pearl but now she's an empty shell. Those two things aren't connected.
Those aren't related.
Yeah, I mean they're related in the sense that you pull the pearl out of the shell.
Right.
But but leads to like Hummingbird Heartbeat, which I wrote down, probably the best song on the album. But it does sound a bit like she doesn't know much about hummingbirds. As it spread my wings is not an image one associates.
That doesn't happen. But the idea of a fast heartbeat or whatever was good. Okay, can I tell you can I read you her description of the song?
Yes.
Okay, so it was inspired by Russell. Okay. I was at breakfast when I saw this hummingbird, and the hummingbird was having breakfast as well. And I don't know if you know, but hummingbirds are supposedly good luck. And I was just thinking about hummingbirds, and I was thinking, how fast is their heartbeat? Like, how many beats per minute? And using that idea as an idea for someone making you feel, instead of those butterflies, making your heart beat really, really fast. It's just like so on the nose, like, again, it's just like, it's just right there. There's no depth to it. It's, oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. And apparently the song was recorded at like 122 beats per minute. So I guess the beat is meant to sort of mimic a hummingbird's heartbeat or something. I don't know.
Okay.
But it is probably the best song on the album. I mean, and I think if I recall, I think she sang this song at some award show or some live performance I saw on TV. And I remember like they were showing videos of Russell Brand when I think this was the song, like everybody made this big deal. Of course, in their relationship just like crushed and burned.
It did, yeah. Did before we move on,
Yeah.
What's your relationship with hummingbirds? Are there a lot of hummingbirds in Florida and Hawaii?
There are a few in Hawaii. I haven't seen any yet. We do have them in Florida. We actually had a tree outside of outside the window of our house on the campus of St. Andrew's School that was one of those little trumpet flowers that like was meant for hummingbirds to come. Right. But the problem is every time it went to flower, the school came by and like hat racked the bush. So we never only once did I see a hummingbird on it.
I remember hummingbirds in Southern California when I would visit my grandparents. And I honestly didn't know that we had them in Kansas, but when we went to stay with my in-laws between houses, in the last several weeks, they had a hummingbird feeder on the porch of the guest house we stayed in, and so we filled it up, made the sugar water or whatever and put it in there. And then there was like 3 different species of hummingbirds that ate at that thing, and those things, it was crazy. Like they are loud, actually. If you're anywhere, proximate to them and not, through a window, like they buzz a lot. And in fact, this was right around the time that murder hornets were a thing. Remember that season of 2020?
Yeah, like that minute.
And I was out there, doing something, and one of the hummingbirds came and buzzed my head, and all I could hear was, and I was like, I'm gonna die. Murder hornets, they're here, But it was just a hummingbird. So I'm a fan. But you're right. Yeah. They don't really soar. They don't spread their wings.
Yeah.
Their wings are constantly in motion.
Right. Which could also be, could be an interesting metaphor for the relationship she had with Russell Brand, maybe, like that it was exhausting trying to keep up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You could use that as an interesting little deconstruction there. I don't know. Not like the movies. Which is not the Alien Ant Farm song. That was their second single off of their album that also featured their really great cover of Smooth Criminal. I wrote also a good song, but I said it's another one that has an evangelical undertone with the whole idea of God's perfect will. She doesn't outright say that, but she's singing about love in such a way that's very familiar to me in the growing up, that there's one person out there for you.
Right. But I think that's problematic. Like, I don't know. I kept listening to it, and I thought that if the message had been like, if it's not like the movies, that's okay. But it's not. It's like, but again, like young girls, like women, need permission to break it off, right?
Right.
But like, do you need to hear it in a pop song, or do you need to be validated in your actual, human relationships to be able to do that? I don't think you should. I don't think that measuring up to some imagined ideal, like the movies, or there's some movie where I remember like the message was like, oh, you have to have the foot pop moment or something. I can't remember what the movie was, but like when you kiss, your foot should
Isn't that Legally Blonde?
Off the ground. Is that what it is?
I think it's Legally Blonde.
I just know that.
Or has it Never Been Kissed?
Anyway, that whole thing of like, it's not real. It's not gonna build up to anything. It's not gonna become something more if it's not this. I just think that's a really dangerous message to send to really anybody, and can lead to just a lifetime of disappointment.
Well, considering that was an issue that I struggled with my entire life, of this idea that there is only one person out there for me. And so it creates this situation of like, you only date that person if you think they're them. And so then you just get so like, that's one of the reasons why I had so many unhealthy relationships with women throughout my like college years and into my 20s, because like I was
everybody was the one.
Everybody was the one.
And so you stay in abusive or harmful relationships longer because you're like, the problem must be me if this person isn't the one.
Right. Yeah. Or you start bordering on abusive behavior yourself because, like, oh, you're the one, you can't leave. Right. Or there's just so many messed up things that come out of it. And like, I just think about like how much my faith in God was shaken every time a girl broke up with me.
Right.
Because it was like, oh, she was the one. You told me she was the one.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, you just get so convinced of that. And so, like, it is such an unhealthy thing. And that's, I mean, we talked about this a little bit when we, a while back on the podcast when we did the episode on kissing, dating, goodbye. And because that was like his whole thing. And he, he's now come out and said, Josh Harris has now come out and said that was like bad. That was like a bad mentality. And like, well, convenient for you to do that now after, I can think of at least 5 marriages I know that were ruined because of his book. Yeah. And because of people rushing off to get married because that's what you're supposed to do. But yeah, anyway, yeah, it is an unhealthy and I think dangerous thing. And then the album just ends, by the way, like the song is just done. And you're like, oh, okay. There's no like moment. It just, we done.
Yeah, but how can you? I mean, the term for that in narrative pacing is the denouement, right? Mm-hmm. But like, if your songs are all just like super shallow and like direct, right? And there's not actually like a peak to it, then you don't. The denouement is like a slow ramp down to nothing, if it's anything. So there's not like a need to bring it down, really. There's not a need to have it like that. I guess.
But anyway, yeah. So that's Teenage Dream by Katy Perry. Do you have final thoughts, Patrick?
Listen, I think I really want to be. I don't know if we've talked about this before. I think we have. If we've not talked about it on Masters of Divinity, then I think you and I have talked about it. But I'm trying really hard to be defined by what I like rather than what I hate.
Yeah.
And I do. There is a soft place in my heart for the female-led pop music of the late aughts and early teens, because that was, early marriage, going to weddings, going, parties at DTS, like it was the music that was kind of like happening. And so I would include like Lady Gaga and Kesha and all those kinds of that ilk. So I do not like this album as an album, but I have to say that whatever the like mill that churned out both the character of Katy Perry and the music that goes with her and Dr. Luke and whoever else. And I know Dr. Luke's a problematic person right now and all that, but like, it is a very successful pop product, and that can be a good. I can respect that, even if I also am like annoyed by how shallow everything is.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that, and I think there was a very important time. I remember on road trips with Kana and stuff around this time, I would just put on the radio because I was like, I need to know what's actually happening in music. I just sort of feel like listening to pop music, and so a lot of this stuff, would show up on the radio, and I really wound up liking it. But I think now that like I've actually sat down and listened to this whole album, I think this is one of the lesser products of that time period. And I feel like a lot of the ground that's being covered here was covered better by someone else.
Yeah.
What, like Born This Way, right? Didn't Born This Way come out around the same time as Firework?
I think Born This Way is much later.
Later, okay.
Yeah. This is around the time of Poker Face and all those ones.
Yeah.
Maybe those may have been a little earlier.
That's true. But like, for example, like you brought up TikTok in comparison to Last Friday Night.
2009. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like TikTok.
Oh no, you're right. You're Born This Way is 2011, so it's close to this.
Yeah. So like I feel like the message of Born This Way is a similar message to what she's trying to get with Firework, but it's so much more. It's so much more effective.
Yeah.
Coming from Lady Gaga.
Who was already a gay icon, right? So she could create a gay anthem. It wasn't like Katy Perry being like, you know what would be really great? It would be really great if I did like an album that has a whole bunch of rainbows on it, and then I did a song about fireworks. I bet that would be a good gay anthem.
Yeah. It's kind of like, you know, when companies stick gay flags on their windows and their logos and stuff during the month of June to kind of make it look like hey, we're gay friendly, like at a time where it's, you know, low risk to do it now.
Or like all these companies now that are sending, it's like when COVID happened, like you got all these emails from everybody, all these companies saying how they were responding to COVID, and then like the same companies are also like, oh yeah, now we care about Black lives as well. here's all these emails about like we as a company support this. Like, you're not changing anything about, you know, you still have an entirely white board and CEO and like no diversity. Like, you're not creating any actual change in the world. Like, you're seizing a moment for gain.
Oh yeah. So I will say this in my final thoughts on Teenage Dream.
Okay.
Lyrically, it's shallow. Message, like I said, I think other pop musicians of the same time period covered the ground more effectively. Musically, like just in terms of just the music itself, it's nothing new. But my God, is it catchy? I mean, I'm like brushing my teeth this morning singing Last Friday Night, you know. And the thing is like as empty as I think the song Firework is, it will always make my spirit soar when I hear it.
Right. I am a firework, Katie. Thank you.
Yeah. Like, I know you're telling me just to be a flash in the pan, but you know what? Damn it. I'm going to burn out bright.
Light up the world.
I'm going to go boom, boom, boom. That's right. Boom, 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 brighter than the moon, moon, moon. Poetry.
She's a genius.
So, right. There we go. All right, well, you've got to go. I've got to go. Yeah. Lunchtime for me. It's dinner time for you. You have a family and kids. Those two things are completely related. I don't know why.
Well, thanks everybody for sticking with us for this two-man edition of Masters of Divinity.
Yep.
It's been quite a journey through music. June him.
Yep. Want to thank Officer Matt for not being with us, and I want to thank JP for not being with us, because then
it would have been a pile-on. I think that's part of the problem, right?
Maybe.
Like it wasn't.
Maybe. I don't know. I have a feeling Matt would be a defender because Matt really loves pop music. Really loves it. And that's fine.
He was able to turn you all around on NSYNC too. So.
Hey, I think if anything, this proved to me that NSYNC actually has depth. So, with
next time we'll do Gaga. All right.
I almost thought about suggesting Chromatica because like it's brand new. I haven't listened to it yet. Let's just throw it out there.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, Patrick,
it
was good being with you.
It was always good being with you. It's always good being with you. Thanks for this time.
Mahalo.
Yeah, you didn't say aloha at the beginning, so you have to say mahalo now.
Yep.
All right.
And also, aloha means goodbye.
So aloha to you.
Aloha to you. Good journey.
Good journey.